In Maine's 2nd congressional district, 2 candidates are running this year for the Republican nomination. Bruce Poliquin and Liz Caruso will face each other in the primary election on June 14th. This is Liz Caruso's first run for major office. She has served for several years as a town councilor in the town of Caratunk in western Maine, where she lives with her family. We sat down for an interview a few days ago, and my first question to her was straightforward. Why are you running for the U.S. House of Representatives?
Rural Mainers are reeling from the situation that they are dealing with because career politicians and the ruling elite in D.C. have transformed government. And they are looking for someone who they can identify with, someone who is a rural Mainer herself, to represent them in Congress.
What may be the #1 pocketbook issue right now for people not just in Maine but across the country is inflation. How should inflation be addressed? What can be done to bring it down?
Well, we need to open up the economy. We need to stop with the lockdowns did a lot of damage. We need to bring our gas prices down, and we need to stop the war on the U.S. oil and gas industry.
This is a worldwide problem. Inflation, it was just announced in the last few days, inflation in Great Britain is the highest it's been there in 40 years. So this is not just a U.S. problem. How can it be addressed if it's a global issue?
Well, this is a global issue. I mean, what happens in the United States affects the world. So we need to stop with the printing and spending that is going on in D.C. The politicians and the ruling elite that are down in D.C., career politicians, are out of touch with what Mainers and the working class is facing.
I want to ask you about a balanced budget. That is something you favor. The United States government hasn't had a balanced budget since the 1990s. Making it happen is going to be extremely challenging. Tell me specifically, what taxes would you raise or what programs would you cut to try to bring about a balanced budget?
Well, absolutely. I think we need to have a balanced budget amendment. And we need to make sure that government is keeping their hands out of Americans' pockets. And that we don't have a
give me
nanny
specific
state.
examples, because those are the votes, the tough votes that are going to have to be made. Where would you raise taxes or where would you cut programs?
Well, I think we should have a gradual reduction in the income tax. I think we should make sure that we are not over-regulating main industries because all of the regulation causes taxation. So Mainers need to keep more.
You said you want to lower the income tax. Wouldn't that mean lower revenues? And how does that lead to a more balanced budget?
There are ways that have been in plenty of states where where citizens, there are states that don't have income taxes, and they are very successful. So there are options. I'm not saying that I can tell you every single thing that I would do, but we need, the point is, we cannot have the ruling elite who don't struggle with everyday household purchases and everyday activities with their kids, with their businesses, their livelihoods.
Let's move on to another topic. Let me ask you about abortion. Would you support the repeal of Roe versus Wade?
So personally, I am 100% pro-life, but I am also 100% pro-women. And I believe that the assault on women is unprecedented and is something that we never thought we would ever have to be dealing with at this time.
If you were in Congress and legislation came before Congress on banning abortion, would you support that legislation?
Well, Roe versus Wade is at the Supreme Court, so we're waiting for that. But in terms of if there was some legislation,
there is talk that there could be national legislation. Obviously, it would also be up to the states, but there has been talk that there could be national legislation.
Absolutely. So I am 100% pro-life. I believe in the sanctity of life. I believe that every life has value. And I believe that we need to be a voice for the voiceless and to defend the defenseless. However, if Roe versus Wade was overturned, that would just bring it back to the states for the states to determine. And that's where it should be determined. And currently, in the state of Maine, an overturn of Roe versus Wade at the Supreme Court would not change the abortion situation in the state of Maine.
Let me ask you about the 2016 presidential election. Who do you believe won that?
Well, if you look at the Electoral College and the certification that they gave, it shows that Biden won. But over 60% of the American population believe that there was voter fraud at some level.
Is there any compelling evidence that there was voter fraud on a widespread level that would have changed the outcome of that contest?
Well, it is being investigated in a variety of states. And I believe that having an election integrity and absolute voter confidence is absolutely critical to the foundation of the United States.
Would you support Donald Trump if he runs for president in 2024?
If he was our Republican candidate, I would.
We're doing this interview here because the corporate policy at our station is that only people who have been vaccinated are allowed into the building. You have not been vaccinated. If you were elected to Congress,
how do you know I haven't been vaccinated? I never said I wasn't vaccinated. I said that that's a real problem to isolate one group of people, to put Mainer versus Mainer, vaccinated versus unvaccinated, masked versus unmasked. And we shouldn't be polarizing our population. And it's really none of the government's business or any other business's business if someone has personal medical decisions that they want to keep private.
If there were a requirement in the Capitol building that one had to be vaccinated to enter that building, and you were a member of Congress who refused to say if you had been vaccinated, how would you handle that?
The same way I'm handling it now, it's not anyone's business. I believe that medical freedom is part of our rights as United States citizens. And government has to stop being a nanny state and stop interfering with the life of its citizens.
Does that apply to children who go to school who have not been immunized against measles and a number of other diseases?
It is all freedom. This is not an issue of whether or not, if people want to get vaccinated or wear a mask, great. If people don't want to get vaccinated and don't want to wear a mask, great. This is freedom.
We're also interviewing the other Republican candidate in the 2nd District congressional race, Bruce Poliquin. You'll see that interview tomorrow right here on 207.